Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, the Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Sanko for the second Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And today, well, first, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport. But today, we have a first-time guest about to be the newest member covering the NBA for ESPN, Vincent Goodwill. Vinny, what is going on? How are you doing? Thank you for joining the Pistons Pulse.
Hey, what's going on, you guys? Happy to be here, man.
What does this time of year look like for you?
Yes.
I mean, like, you're in the middle of a job change, and obviously training camp is starting for some teams this week, some next. Like, what stage of chaos are you in, or is there a stage of chaos at this point yet?
No, not yet. Not yet. Okay. I think next week, once all the camps open up and you really have to start paying attention to everything that's going on. Like, it's chaos until, right? And then everything kind of settles down and you get into the rhythm of the regular season or the preseason or whatever. So right now, I'm like you guys. I am trying to take the last deep breath of freedom. And then after that deep breath of freedom, we are off and running until what? Summer League again?
Something like that. Something like that. Obviously, congrats on the job.
Thank you.
You know, you and James will like. I don't know if you guys are going to bring back Detroit players. Like, if you have to call it New York players or New Jersey, wherever you live in. I don't know, but it's cool, man. I'm
trying not to reunite with James too much. I see too much of him as is.
What is the new gig for the listeners? Like, I mean, team specific stuff, but the league as a large. What exactly will you be doing for ESPN?
Well, I will be an ESPN senior writer, which I'm not sure exactly what the senior writer title is, other than the fact that they gave it to me. And I'll be covering the Knicks and the NBA at large. So it'll be a lot of Knicks, but a lot of also, Brooklyn Nets because they're in the area. But the NBA at large, like covering the entire league, similar to what I did for 7 years at Yahoo Sports. Just bigger platform. And clearly the Knicks are one of, if not the biggest story on this side of the East Coast. So just being a lot around them and being in New York, living in New York when I move there, whenever that is, just having to keep the pulse on that. In Madison Square Garden, you guys have been there. You guys know what that atmosphere is like. So it'll be pretty exciting.
All right, let's get into some Detroit basketball content, because while they may not be, at the top of the East like the New York Knicks, they're also not the bottom of the East like the Brooklyn Nets. So let's start here, Vinny. Where I always like to give this context. Where were you going into the offseason for Detroit? Because I think that starts kind of your perception of how the offseason went. Were you big move, run it back? Obviously, Malik Beasley situation changed it up. So what did you want to see Trajan do? And then what were your feelings once you saw it kind of play out?
I think, continuity is such an ugly word, right? In today's NBA, because everybody's always expecting the next big splash. And if there was no splash to be had, then you did your work before. You did your work in the draft. You did your work, as far as some of the moves that have been made previously, and then going out and figuring out what's going on with Malik Beasley. Can you guys imagine if the Pistons signed Malik Beasley to that deal and then everything with the Feds wound up coming out later? Can you imagine how
I've never thought of it that way. I've never thought of it from that side. That's good perspective. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize.
No, you're good. No, you're good. No, I just think maybe that's a way that good luck to some degree, not to say that anything with Beasley happening is good for him or good for the franchise, because it's not, but just the cloud that's around it. They don't have that necessarily to worry about. I'm sure we're going to get some questions on Media Day next Monday about it, because you got a roster spot open, and if Beasley is cleared, then clearly it'll behoove other teams like the Pistons to take a strong look at how they can offer more money than any other team. But for me, the continuity of, let's see what Jaden Ivey looks like. Let's give Ausar Thompson a summer where he can actually play basketball and look at film and everything else. Like, they didn't have the work to do that, say, the Atlanta Hawks had to do or the Miami Heat had to do. A lot of teams had to undergo major roster reconstruction because they underachieved last year. They had major injury problems that snake bitten them throughout the playoffs, or financial issues that came up over the summer with the second apron. The only thing the Pistons need to do that they haven't done is figure out these extensions for Jaden, Ivey, and Jalen Duren. Other than that, and this is right around the time that you figure out those things anyway, so I don't want anybody to feel like that they haven't handled their business. Usually these things happen in October, sometime before the start of the season, before the deadline, before you get really serious, because you don't want a Jonathan Kuminga situation, a Cam Thomas situation, a Josh Giddey situation. You want everybody to go into the season with a clear mind, especially these young guys. You don't want them to feel like they got to sing for their supper again after having career years. I think that, to me, was the most important and still is the most important order of business for the franchise.
We could just review what they did this offseason, and obviously outside of, I mean, it probably would have been a lot more straightforward had the Malik Beasley news not broke when it did, but you end up with Duncan Robinson on a partially guaranteed deal. You have Karis LeVert, and then you bring back Paul Reed. You add Javonte Green. So really just bringing a new complement of vets, and you kind of look at the outline of that. Clearly there's boxes they wanted to check, some ball handling. Obviously you need shooting. What did you make of their offseason moves? And obviously it seems they tried to walk two paths of checking those boxes they had last season, but also not overcommitting financially for reasons you just mentioned.
The temptation, I think, is to bathe in the success of last season. And you have to almost fight off like this urge to capitalize off of that and say, let's go do something, right? Like that's the urge that leads you to go and getting Blake Griffin when he's, down to one leg, essentially. You know what I mean? I think there was prudence in the front office here. Yeah, you had some holes to fill. You had to figure out, okay, if Hardaway isn't coming back, what was it going to look like as far as bringing in, a team defender and a veteran and a shooter. And you wound up getting that in Karis LeVert and Duncan Robinson. And I think you're going to figure out, I would probably assume Duncan Robinson's going to start the season just because you need a floor spacer next to Cade and everything else. But you also want to keep the decks cleared for your young guys to grow at the pace that they need to grow at. Not in a way that, hey, young guys, go and live for yourself. Like you guys got 1 year of real basketball. Now you guys go out and do it for yourself. These young guys still need veterans out there. It's an 82 game. It's a long season. It's a marathon. Injuries are going to happen. Things are going to happen. So you bring in vets who are not going to necessarily take up all the space, but they're not useless vets on the back end of the bench who can't actually play. That's the fine line that you have to walk. This year, I think is going to be far more important, even more important than last year, because you got Ivey and Duren, who you're going to hope to sign. Keep coming back to that. But if you get them signed, their contracts wind up kicking in next season. They take up a bigger chunk of your salary cap, even with the TV money coming in, and they'll probably smooth the cap and everything else. But you need to figure out which one of these young guys, how many of these young guys is going to be long-term in your plans around Cade Cunningham as you try to elevate yourself from this spot in the Eastern Conference where you're a competent team to being a team. Can you be a team or turn yourself into a team that can be reckoned with in year 2 or 3 of Cade's contract? Because that contract is going to escalate even more then. So the clock is ticking on everything.
Real quick, just from Mark, thank you so much for the super chat. We really, really appreciate that. Just the offseason as an overall, and then we'll get into what you expect to see from J.I., J.D., Ausar. You've kind of alluded to that. I know O2 asked kind of all of that, but was there a move that you loved more than others? Was there maybe a player out there you think they should have pursued a little bit more? Maybe you really like Chaz Lanier in the draft, or I know Bobby Clintman was 2 drafts ago, but is there anything like that before we get into kind of the young core that you really loved, thought they missed out on, anything like that stands out to you?
No, I'll tell you, there was a player I was genuinely fascinated by, and he wound up getting moved, but I didn't think that they had the resources to go and get him. Like, I love John Collins. Okay. Like, I think that springy, run the floor, play above the rim type of big, but that would have cost you so much in terms of capital because he's a $25 million player and everything else, and he's kind of undersized. He's not really a 4 or a 5. It's just certain players like that are really, really intriguing. So not to say they should have done it, but that was just a guy that I thought, let me see where he goes and how that fits and everything else. And he's found a home with the Clippers, although they got bigger other problems on their on their docket right now. But yeah, I think being able to pivot from Beasley as quick as they did, that was critical. Like, like you can say what you like. It's not like Beasley went and signed with another team and they got outbid and they got caught with their, you know what I mean? You got caught with your hand off the throttle. Like this was something that wasn't even basketball related. Like the feds are involved and you got to be able to have a plan B. That speaks to a level of competence in the front office that I can't say that this franchise has had in a very, very long time. Just the fact that you're able to pivot that quickly, still hold a space in case something cleared up, but you figured out a role that you can fill. And shooting seems like the easiest thing to fill in the NBA. You can always get a guy who can make a shot. But being able to get that in the early days of free agency when guys have to go get their money in the first 36, 48 hours before it dries up, that was really impressive to me.
For sure. Let's look at, we could do the extension talk now, just because I know we're going to talk about, next season, getting into segment 2. But that's probably the main outstanding piece of business for this franchise. Ivey and Duren are both, I think in unique spots when coming off the injury. Duren obviously, being a big man, and I think that market can always be tough to pin down. I guess, what's your thoughts in general on them, and what's the scenario the Pistons are facing here as far as the upside of locking a guy in versus going into next season where the market may be a little bit different?
I don't think you want the bad juju. You know what I mean? Like these young guys in today's league, and I'm not saying this with any shade. I say this with all respect. These young guys pay so much attention to what's going on outside, to social media. It's hard to keep that noise from getting into your head, from getting into your locker room. And you don't want what you're building, like this alphabet soup, so to speak, of chemistry and good vibes, to be disrupted because a player doesn't feel wanted. And there's a line between max player and we don't know if we want you. And clearly, none of these guys are max players, but clearly you want them. And they're a part of your future. Like Jalen Duren, I think he took strides last year. Oh, I want to see if you agree with me in terms of his endurance, in terms of his like defensive awareness and everything. It was like, yeah, so what? He was going to struggle in a playoff series against Karl Towns just because of the matchup problem. And you wound up switching Tobias on him and everything else. But if Stu was healthy, then some of those things are mitigated anyway. And you're not looking at Jalen with such a close eye because you're keeping him close to the basket and everything else. And so much of last year, as a whole was so new for these guys that you want to try to replicate the energy, even though you can't. Jaden Ivey is a more interesting case to me, even though Jalen Duren is at a position that's hard to peg, right? You don't know how much you're going to pay a center who's got a handle but can't shoot, who's a good rebounder but not necessarily a great defender, but can finish at the rim and is a great floor spacer as a vertical floor spacer. Jaden Ivey is in such an interesting case because if I remember correctly, the Pistons were 14-18 going into that January 1st game when Cole Anthony decided to dive head first into Jaden Ivey's body parts. You know what I mean? Like, and that's no fault of J.I. And I remember maybe a few games before that, J.I. hit the game winner against the Toronto Raptors. I think Cade was out that game, and you got to see J.I. really start to grow and come into his own, which was a stark change from what we saw last year when we weren't even sure, man, is Killian Hayes getting more burn than this guy? Like, it was amazing, the turn. But then you go from 14-18 to basically going on a 5-game winning streak once you put a star in the starting lineup and stuff opens up because you got a better defender there. That's not to say that Jaden Ivey held up the team. You know what I mean? That's not to say that, and it's easy for someone to, correlation, causation, and everything else. I think that'd be unfair. But the question you also have to ask is, A, where's his health? Does he have that burst? Because it was a lower leg injury. If he doesn't have the burst, he's not the same player. And if he doesn't have the burst, does that make him as good of a catch and shoot 3-point shooter that he was turning into having a career year? But if he does, you got a second side scorer. You got a guy who can get it off the bounce. Whether he's starting or coming off the bench, I don't know if that matters as much. But I think young guys want to get paid and they want to get validated. If they get paid, I don't know if it matters if you start or come off the bench because the organization has given you a level of security. But if you're coming off the bench and your business isn't done, that's just going to create a very sensitive situation in that locker room and on the floor.
So I agree with you. I think in general, Vinny, I think JD is I think he's a little bit easier to peg as a player. We kind of know what he is. Now, the center market is weird because like Ivica Zubac is awesome, making $20 million a year. And like none of us are going to argue that Jalen Duren is better than him. But like, some of those comps are a little bit off. You mentioned like J.I. coming off the bench. So for you, I'll ask you to put your Trajan Langdon hat on. Or is that what you're offering J.I. is like best six man in the NBA type of money? Are you trying to pay him like a starter? Like where is that? Because I think that's why I find it hard with J.I. Vinny is like, is he the number 2 scorer or is he the sixth man? And the delta and the separation between those things and what you want to pay that guy is somewhat significant. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. But if you're looking at this in a vacuum of this season, that is one thing. But if you're projecting what J.I. can turn into, if he is this spread out, knockdown shooter, then that changes the math on everything that you do in the future. Because one thing is for sure, Ausar Thompson has to start. He is the second most important player on this roster behind Cade Cunningham. It's not to say better or worse. It's just he's so unique in what he does. He has to start. But when you're sitting in that boardroom or whatever with Jaden and Ivey, you're saying, hey, training camp is an open competition. We're going to put the best 5 players out there that complement each other. And even if you don't start, it does not mean you're not going to play 30 minutes a night, that you're not going to finish games, most games anyway, because teams value spacing at the end of games more than they value defense. And you want to have You want to play a little bit smaller. You want to play a little bit quicker. You can play Ausar damn near from 2 to 4 if all things, are created equal. So therefore, it creates space for a guy like J.I. to play off the ball with Cade. I don't know if that appeals to his sensibilities. I don't know if that's something that's going to, be a non-starter for him, is to not guarantee him a starting spot, but to give him the money. I think saying, hey, this is open competition. This is a great thing that you are going to be a part of, and you're going to get paid. Can we all figure this out? I don't think J.I., as a competitor as he seems to be, will want something handed to him. You know what I mean? Nor do I think he wants to say, hey, it's between me and Ausar Thompson. I don't think he would necessarily think of that, because if you think of it in that way, you're usually going to go towards the most aggressive player, the more impactful player, and it might be Ausar Thompson right now. But I get you. The second scorer and the sixth man are 2 different things, but that's just for this season.
I'm going to answer this question real quick from Pistons fan. We can't extend him mid-season or later. No, they have to lock in the extension the day before the regular season starts, which I think is like October 20th.
Something like that.
So you've got like a month essentially to lock that figure in. Vinny, before we go to segment 2, I have another extension question. You look at what Houston's done, and they've kind of walked this line a few times over the seasons, where you give Jalen Green around $30 a year, only a 3-year deal with him. So, you kind of gave him more money on a shorter deal, and you parlay that into Kevin Durant, but you do the same thing with Şengün. Like, he didn't get the max, but he might have got like 35 or something like that. Jabari Smith Jr. this offseason got around 22 to 25 a year, something like that. So Houston consistently have shown that they're willing to pay and extend guys maybe before they've proven that they can live up to that type of deal. Is that something the Pistons could pursue here? Does that make sense when you look at the potential upside that a guy like an Ivey or a Duren have?
I don't even think it's extending them early. I think, when you project where this, the new salary cap is going to be, and it's made exponential jumps, like, not to go old man yelling at cloud here. When I first started covering the Pistons in 2010, I want to say the salary cap was $58 million. Like, before you go into the tax and everything else, and it was flat for a number of years. Like, it didn't go up significantly until the cap spike of 2016 came, which enabled the Golden State Warriors to sign Kevin Durant directly into it, just because of the media rights deals and everything else that happened. As long as you don't max out a player, the key in CBA 101 is make sure that the raises are not max raises, because the max raises will be tied to the salary cap. So even if the salary cap jumps, the percentage of your contract is going to jump, therefore limiting, flexibility that you have to go out and sign new players if projections come up a little bit higher. That's the fine line that the Pistons have to walk, because you don't want to say, Jalen Duren, you're not worth X amount of dollars. You know what I mean? Because once again, these young guys are super, super sensitive. I'm not saying Jalen Duren is more sensitive than the average player or anything like that. I don't think he is. I think he's a reasonably mature dude, especially a big dude. You know what I mean? Like it takes a lot to survive in this atmosphere. So I think for the extensions, Houston had things in their back pocket. Like they had a treasure trove of young players that they could give up 3 and still have another 3 in their back pocket, like the Cam Whitmores and, you know, said Jabari. Like, wasn't Jabari like almost like a kind of an odd man out in a way? And now, because of everything that's happened, he's front and center. And then they still got Reed Shepherd after losing Fred VanVleet for the entire season. Like the Pistons don't have that type of, you know, treasure trove of young guys, but they got a decent amount where, wait a minute, we still ain't talked about Ron Holland yet and the type of jump that maybe that he can make in year 2 and what positions he can play. So they're in pretty good. They're not in premium shape, but they're in really good shape.
We definitely need to talk about Ron Holland, but at the end of the day, Vinny, we're 21 minutes and 30 seconds in, and we haven't really talked about Cade Cunningham yet. And I think we just have like a rule on this podcast that we can't hit 25 minutes without talking about the face of the franchise. So I want to get your thoughts on Cade Cunningham. Were you surprised with what we saw from last year? And just like, where do you think he's at with his game? Is there another step forward? Is he perennial all NBA to you? Just wax poetically on Cade Cunningham, however you feel.
I think last year wasn't surprising for me from a performance standpoint. I think we always saw, like the leader in him, because during that 28 game losing streak, whatever the hell it was, like he walked his ass down to that podium room every single night and took the bullets. Even if we as the media knew this ain't Cade's fault. This ain't for Cade to take accountability for things that are above his head. But he took the if not me, then who approach, because it was plenty of people in that building who didn't want to sit in front of the media, who didn't want to take questions. That showed me the leader. And I think we all knew he had the pedigree. It was, to me, a matter of health and roster construction. And once you got the health, all right, cool, he's going to perform. Then the roster construction came. I think what you saw toward the end of last season, and people are going to have what they feel towards the end of that playoff series, what you saw was a tired dude who had not played basketball that long at a high intensity in his life. You went from your season being over in the middle of November to playing in the first day of May. That is a long time for your mind and your body to have to figure stuff out. And I expected him to be tired. I expected him to have to figure stuff out on the back end. Do I think there's another level? Yeah, but I think it's more incremental changes. By that, I mean, okay, are you going to be a really good on-the-ball defender? Because he was a good on-the-ball defender last year, and a really good defender late in games. Like his defensive intensity ratcheted up, you know, as in late in games. I think it was the Atlanta game where he came over and snuffed out Okongwu at the rim, and it wasn't even his help. He just came down and did it. Like, it's just plays like that you can't teach. Catching and shooting. Like, let's just say Ausar Thompson is a secondary ball handler and a really good passer, which he can be. That means Jaden Ivey can handle it, Ausar can handle it, and it also means that, Cade, you don't have to create every shot for everybody. You can live off of the attention that everybody else gets. And if you turn into a 40% off catch and shoot threes, that opens so much up in the offense just because it limits it adds to the bandwidth that you can handle without adding to the responsibility that you have to carry for 40 minutes. And at his size, him being a really good defender, even though Ausar is going to take the toughest matchup, Cade is still going to have to guard his man a lot of nights. And even sometimes when Ausar is in foul trouble, have to take those matchups. But so I think being able to feed off of other people as opposed to having a responsibility to feed everybody, to me, that's the next step in his game. And if he's there, then we're talking about all NBA second team. Then we're talking about guys saying, hey, I want to come play with Cade. This is the guy.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking second team All NBA this year. I thought he He could have made that. That's where I had him on my list. But we're going to take a short break here. I have one more question on Cade after the break. O2, if you got something for Vinny on Cade, you can ask him. But before we move on to Ron Holland or anybody else on the roster, I do want to ask one more thing on Cade. But we'll get into that right after this.
All right, we are back with segment 2, and we're going to get right back to Cade Cunningham before we open the floor to some other players here.
Yeah, so Vinny, what you kind of broke some of it down, the defense, the catch and shoot. What do you think is the biggest thing? If you could say, boom, Cade's going to be better in this area in 25-26, what would that be for you? Is it the point of attack defense, the 3-point shooting, the finishing at the rim, the foul drawing, or something else? What would be the one thing you say, snap your fingers, be better at that?
Well, I think the foul drawing thing is something that draws a lot of attention because of the contact that he gets. And a lot of times when you talk to refs, they will say Cade is often parallel with his defender, and he doesn't create a disadvantage for the defender, even if he creates contact. And in this town, contact doesn't always equal a foul. Like, this is just the way that we've watched basketball for the better part of 30, 40 years or whatever, right? But for Cade, he does get an inordinate amount of non-calls compared to the contact that he draws, and he doesn't go to the line as much. I think some of that is respect from the refs, and they know, okay, this guy is a superstar. Not that superstar calls exist, but you're going to get more respect from the refs when situations like this arise. And when Cade, I think sometimes you got to let the refs know, hey, I got whacked there, or watch out for this or this, just certain things of diplomacy. And refs will say, you know what, my bad, I missed it. Go into the locker room and go and check it out and be back. You know, that sort of thing. If Cade gets himself to the line 7 or 8 times a night, that changes the math on everything. That releases the burden on him. I don't want him to have to be the point of attack defender because he's only going to play 34, 35 minutes a night. You don't want him expending so much energy on both ends of the floor. I want him to be able to plug the holes on defense. And because he can go to the glass, get down there and help with Stu and Duren, but you also want him being able to leak out because he's so good in the open floor. So for me, it's just a matter of doing the little things a little bit better so that you have enough energy down the stretch to sustain when all eyes of the defense are going to be on you.
We've talked about all the young guys pretty much except Ron Holland. He was the first Pistons lottery pick since who knows when that came into the year with an uncertain role, right? Like, he clearly wasn't going to start. It wasn't clear if he would, be ready enough day one to contribute. And he pretty much forced the issue, right? He should have played 82 games, played in 81, 15 minutes per night. What impressed you most about Ron last season, and then what is a realistic year 2 growth for him, especially in a rotation where you look at that power forward spot and there might be some minutes up for grab?
Yeah, you know what impressed me was that the fact that it seemed like he really came to work with like an enthusiasm every day. You know what I mean? Not that I was at every practice like, you guys were, like my responsibilities carried me other places, but I never got the feeling that it was a drag for him. You know what I mean? And I also felt like he knew, man, I'm a rookie. I'm 19 and Cade is older, and kind of like melding himself into, okay, this guy's the guy. This guy's the leader, but him still bringing a different element of energy, a different element of aggressiveness. Like, there's an aggressiveness with Ron Holland that is like, some people, look, man, I don't care if you square up with Jordan Clarkson. I don't care. Like, yeah, you're going to get thrown out. Don't do it every night. But the fact that you have no back down, and because Cade plays so under control and doesn't have that burst of extra gear where he's just going to, blow by you, to have a guy like Holland who, we would see him down, we would see him grab a rebound, go end to end, and just, boom, take it like a burst and get to the rim and finish. You know what I mean? And punch the stanchion. Like, those are those little energy plays that help you throughout the course of a night, that help you out throughout the course of a season. To me, if he can hit the corner 3, that to me is the biggest thing. Like the body is going to grow and everything else. You're going to see how his body feels out. But if he can hit that corner three and you can see that growth sort of coming, I feel confident in saying you can expect Ron Holland to be a better shooter than Ausar Thompson, which is not a bad thing on Ausar Thompson, but it's just to say that we expect more from Holland as far as being a catch and shoot corner three and using that athleticism. Absolutely.
Rodrigo listening from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Omari, what time is it in Brazil?
5 a.m.
Oh, bro. He's not in Australia. It's a running joke, Vinny. O2 doesn't understand latitude or longitude.
Most people do not know, like off the top of their head, what time it's going to be.
But people know that Brazil is in South America, which isn't that crazy in terms of longitude. Whatever. Ask Vinny your question about Ron Holland.
Tell us what time it is, Rodrigo. Vinny, you mentioned the Jordan Clarkson thing, which cracked me up. But being the Pistons historian that you are, like, who was the last Piston to get in almost as many fights as Ron did last year?
Stu doesn't count.
Yeah, not counting Stu. Stu is his own. Yeah. Stu is a cheat for that category. But
okay, Stu doesn't count, huh? This is going to shock you guys. I feel like Charlie Villanueva got into a lot of skirmishes and stuff with people. Now, that's not as far back as like the going to work guys and everything else. But I started covering the Pistons when they turned into like bad boys, right? But I feel like Jason Maxiell or Charlie Villanueva would be the players. Charlie Villanueva got into it with Ryan Hollins, I want to say. Maybe on the last night of the regular season, the first day that Tom Gores was introduced as Pistons owner in 2011. And this is back in the old days of Palace, where there's the one tunnel by the visitors' bench, Omari. And they got into it. They got thrown out. And Charlie signaled to Ryan Hollins, if I remember it was Ryan Hollins. He did this wave, like, come on, like, meet me in the back. So the intrepid reporter that I decided to follow. Like, I got up out of my seat on press row. I tried to, getting past security was something because they were trying to hold up and everything else. So by the time I got back, Charlie Villanueva was being held back by security saying, like, I'm going to kill this dude. Because they had tried to meet in the loading dock. And it was the early days of the camera phones, and I didn't have the camera phone out to get it, to get it really like that. But yeah, that was that. And there was the James Johnson, Andre Drummond skirmish of 2014, where Drummond gave James Johnson a forearm shiver after dunking on Drummond. And James Johnson is like a third-degree black belt. Like, he's literally like the person you don't want it with at all. And I believe they may have had a conversation in like that loading dock area where Drummond was like, "Hey, dog, I want no smoke."
Real quick, Mark says, Bryce, it's 8:30 in Perth. Listen, I'm on point with Australia because my guy Sam Vicini lives over there, so I always know what time it is in Australia. Rodrigo says it is. Read that time for us, O2. Can you read that time?
That is 21:38.
No,
yes, military time.
No, okay. So what time is it?
It's 8:30 or 9:30 actually.
Okay,
9:30.
there we go.
Yeah,
9:30. Okay. All right, Vinny. Wes was adamant that we ask you this, and I think this is the time to do it. As you may know, I didn't grow up a Pistons fan. Like, this isn't what so I don't know this story, so I need you to reminisce and tell us about the mutiny.
I knew it was coming.
The locker room revolt of John Kuster. Like, Vinny, tell me the story, please.
Philly Freedom, I think, is what we settled on. It's either Philly Freedom or Roundball Revolution. Like, we did a little alliteration there. I was working at the Detroit News at the time. Vince Ellis was working at the Detroit Free Press. We almost skipped shoot-around, believe it or not, because Vince drove the wrong way on the way to the Philadelphia arena. And it was the day after the trade deadline, so that's the only reason we went. It was like February 29th or whatever it was. It's coming down to the stretch of the season where nobody cares anymore, right? So they had openly despised John Kuster. right? And we knew it. He had gotten into so many things with players, and he wasn't a confrontational coach. The problem was that he was non-confrontational at all, and that got on the players' nerves. So the players thought he was going to be fired at the All-Star break. Joe Dumars, the Pistons president at the time, was not on the trip. So we get to shoot around very late. As we get there, I believe in the loading dock in a cab was former Pistons forward Austin Day. As we're walking into the arena, I happen to see a player's phone open, and he was talking to one of his teammates saying, "You need to get here." So antenna's already up. And you're looking around, you're like, man, there's only 6 guys here. Maybe they let them out early or whatever it was, like literally 6 guys. So I'm looking around, and a player says to me, "You don't even know what's going on, do you?" And I said, "Why don't you enlighten me?" And he goes and he sings like Aretha Franklin or Amazing Grace. He gives up everything. I'm talking to a couple players. Vincent's talking to a couple players. Like, it's very obvious that the players did not come to shoot around that day. It was mostly the vets, the players who showed up. If my memory serves, and I'm old, so forgive me. Will Bynum, Charlie Villanueva, Ben Gordon, Greg Monroe was a rookie, DeJuan Summers, and I think Jason Maxill. And Jason Maxill was kind of in that vet spot, but he was a free agent to be. He had to show up to make sure he got his money. Like, he couldn't be messing around with that. So basically, the players told us that this is what happened. We weren't showing up. You know, Tayshaun Prince wasn't there. Tracy McGrady wasn't there. Ben Wallace wasn't there. Rip Hamilton, like the mainstays, the guys, Rodney Stuckey, they weren't there. And never has that ever happened where guys just refuse to show up to work. So and this is in the early days of Twitter, right? Like, this is legit the early fun days of Twitter before it turns into the cesspool, right? So me and Vince Ellis are in the media room. And Vince is like, we don't compare notes. We're like, did you get what I got? And he was like, yeah, I think I got what you got. I'm like, is the NBA world about to be set on fire? And he was like, yep. And next thing you know, we just start tweeting. Then start getting phone calls. Then start getting texts. You know what I mean? Everybody got an excuse. Everybody got a reason. Like, no, we know what we was told. So later that night, I think the Pistons only played like 6 guys. Like, none of the players we had written anything about had anything bad to say to us in the locker room. They were all there in the locker room. You know what I mean? Like, they were all there, and all, like, usually you write something about a player skipping a practice or a shoot around, they ready to fight. You're questioning their professionalism. No, they weren't. And then John Kuster, who wanted to coach the game of his life in his hometown, got thrown out in the second quarter. Got thrown out in the second quarter, y'all. Like, he was so amped up to coach that game against a bad Philly team, mind you, that he couldn't even stop himself from getting thrown out. This is the most docile coach I've ever covered in all my years of being, and I done coached I done been around some coaches, y'all. And he was the most docile, and it hurt him to be thrown out of that game. And if I remember correctly, I feel like Tracy McGrady was caught laughing when he was being thrown out.
So did he last the season? Like, they kept him to the end of the year, and then wow, amazing. Okay, let's get back.
That was
on
a
track.
wild era of Pistons basketball. I was one of the sickos that like watched that whole season. So that was.
So did I.
That my only affiliation to that was I played against DeJuan Summers in college. He was at Georgetown, and like usually guys are like, you get your scouting report and your matchups like 6'7", 6'8", and then you walk out on the court and they're actually 6'4", 6'5". DeJuan Summers said 6'8", 230 or whatever. So I'm walking out, in DC against Georgetown, thinking he's going to be like 6'5", whatever. Nah, like that dude was like 6'8", jacked,
every bit of it.
I was like, no, they were not lying on that one. That was one I was like, oh man, and we got our butts kicked. So let's get back to Pistons basketball.
No, for sure. Vinny, we know you got to get going soon.
Can I ask you about Ausar real quick, Vinny, before you go?
Sure.
We talked about him just a little bit. What do you love about Ausar in his game? And like what you said, the second most important Piston this year. I don't disagree. What is it about his game all around or whatever that you really like?
Just because there's so much open terrain. And I think it's very easy to compare him to his brother and everything else and to figure out who's better. And a man made the jump last year. Will Ausar make the jump this year? Like, I think that limits him in the conversation. But having an on-ball defender who might be the best athlete in the NBA. He might not be the best athlete in his own family, but he might be the best athlete in the NBA. Like, he legit just does things that pop off the screen. And because I say this so often, because Cade Cunningham is a skill player and not the jump out the gym type, you need one of those guys that can create all the matchup problems, that can just muck everything up. Like, he sticks his nose in. He's unafraid. Like, I think the way that the season ended for him specifically last year is going to be a good thing in the long run. I like the fact that, you know what, I'm going to take the Jalen Brunson matchup in the fourth quarter of a playoff game at home in front of this raucous atmosphere that we've never seen at Little Caesars. And so what? Jalen Brunson stuck him, right? And it probably stuck with him all summer. But can you imagine the first time the Knicks and the Pistons play? You think Ausar Thompson is not going to try to tear the rim down every time he sees, you know, Jalen Brunson or Mikal Bridges or OG Anunoby? Like, he just has so much. He's a great rebounder for his size. I think he's got great court vision and passing. He's got that blur. He can jump out the gym. There's just so much space for him to grow, and he can be the best defender in basketball. Period, point blank.
Vinny, one last one. Broadly next season, what does success look like for the Pistons after, you know, this season out of nowhere last year? How do you take a season like that and then say, okay, this is a realistic goal. This is what we need to see to continue to feel secure about what we're building here?
Oh, I think you'll agree with me. Like, you can win the same amount of games and still make progress. Like, you can win 44, 46 games. You don't have to make this 54, 50 win jump, right? Because they won a lot of games, like three-point shooting in the fourth quarter and freaky things just sort of happening, right? Those things usually wind up shaking itself out year over year. You might become a little snake bitten. You might not be as potent of a three-point shooting team late in games or whatever it is, right? But if you're similarly on a 44, 45, 46 win track, in Boston is not going to be contended with this year. Indiana might still be good because they got so much infrastructure there, but they're not going to be an NBA Finals team. If you are a second-round team this year, then I think that constitutes success. Like, I think Atlanta's going to be better. I think Orlando's going to be better. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to have health and everything else. But if you have continuity on your side and you have guys who are going to make real sizable growths to get close to their primes, and all those things can happen without conflicting one another, like Cade getting better doesn't disrupt Ivey getting better, doesn't disrupt Ausar getting better, blah, 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 down the line, you can win the same amount of games and wind up getting to the second round of the playoffs because you have more experience. So I think if we can solidly look at them come April and say, this is a top half playoff team, my bad. I don't know if that was me.
Yeah, it cut out for a minute at the end, but I think we got everything but the very
tail. Picture.
We got you. Yeah. All right. We got to let you go anyway.
No, top half playoff team. Top half playoff team. This top four playoff team by the end of it. That's all.
Got it. I think that's our cue to let you go. We took up too much of your time. We let it run a little bit too far over. Vinny, thank you for joining us. Let everybody know where they can follow you, find you, all your new work, everything you got going. Super excited for you. Nobody deserves it more.
Hey, greatly appreciate you guys. At Vincent Goodwill on the Twitterverse. Not sure where you're going to see me on ESPN, but you'll see me somewhere. Maybe you'll see me on TV. Maybe you'll see me writing. Who the hell knows? You'll find out when I do.
Vinny, you're the GOAT, man. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll see you very soon next week once we get back to the PPC.
See you on Monday, bro. Appreciate you, Bryce.
Yep, yes, 100%. O2, take it away, my guy.
Absolutely. As always, big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, and big shout out to West Davenport, as always. And we'll join you guys after training camp next week.